I'm Brooke Wilson, 32, and at 15 my mother abandoned me at JFK Airport so she could enjoy a luxury vacation with her new husband. She literally left me standing at the terminal, suitcase in hand, with the words, "Jason, and I need alone time." That betrayal changed everything, setting me on a path I never expected. The worst part wasn't even the abandonment, it was what happened years later when our roles suddenly reversed in a way neither of us saw coming. Before I share this journey that still hurts to recall, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal. Growing up, we were your typical middle-class American family, at least that's what I thought. My father, Michael, worked as an accountant for a local firm, bringing in a steady but modest income. My mother, Amber, stayed home until I started middle school, then took a part-time job at a boutique downtown. We lived in a comfortable three-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood in New Jersey. Nothing extravagant, but we had everything we needed. At least, I thought we did. Looking back, I can see the signs that my mother was never truly satisfied with our lifestyle. While Dad and I were content with our annual camping trips to the Poconos and occasional weekends at the Jersey Shore, Mom would flip through luxury travel magazines, sighing dramatically at photos of overwater bungalows in Bora Bora and five-star resorts in the Maldives. One day, she'd say, tracing her finger over images of infinity pools overlooking crystal-clear oceans, "One day I'll experience the finer things." Dad would smile indulgently, but I noticed how his eyes would cloud with worry. "We have a good life, Amber," he'd say. "Maybe when we're older and I've saved more." But that answer was never enough. Mom would snap the magazine shut, muttering about limited thinking and how some people lack ambition. The tension between them grew gradually. I'd wake up to hushed arguments about credit card bills and unnecessary purchases. Mom wanted a kitchen renovation with marble countertops. Dad insisted we couldn't afford it. Mom wanted to trade in our reliable Honda for a BMW. Dad explained how impractical that would be for our budget. "You're holding me back, Michael," became her common refrain. I wasn't meant to live this ordinary life. By the time I turned 13, their marriage had deteriorated beyond repair. The final straw came when Mom secretly applied for a credit card and maxed it out on a weekend spa retreat with her friends. Dad found out when the bill arrived, and the shouting match that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard. 2 weeks later, Dad moved out. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly quick. Mom wanted out as badly as she wanted that luxury lifestyle she'd been dreaming of. I remained with her in our family home, while Dad relocated to a one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. The court granted him weekend visitation, which became my lifeline as Mom grew increasingly distant and resentful of her circumstances. Then came Jason Thompson. Mom met him at a charity gala she'd splurged to attend just 3 months after the divorce. He was everything Dad wasn't: flashy, ostentatious, with the kind of confidence that comes from old money and privilege. At 45, he was 15 years older than Mom, divorced twice, with no children. He owned a chain of high-end car dealerships across the East Coast and lived in a sprawling mansion in the wealthiest part of town. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Suddenly, Mom was being whisked away on weekend trips to Manhattan, dining at restaurants where entrees cost more than our weekly grocery bill, and coming home with shopping bags from designers I'd only seen in magazines. She was giddy with excitement, transformed into a giggling, blushing teenager rather than the mother I knew. "Jason understands me," she'd gush, modeling her new clothes for me. "He knows I was meant for better things." Just 6 months after my parents' divorce was finalized, Mom announced she was marrying Jason. The wedding was a lavish affair at a vineyard estate. I stood awkwardly in my bridesmaid dress, watching my mother marry a man she barely knew while my father spent the weekend alone in his apartment. After the honeymoon, 2 weeks in Italy, we moved into Jason's mansion. My life changed overnight. I went from sharing a bathroom with Mom to having my own suite with a walk-in closet bigger than my old bedroom. The house had a pool, a tennis court, a movie theater, and a staff of 3 who cooked, cleaned, and maintained the property. But despite the material upgrades, I felt increasingly isolated. Mom was busy adapting to her new lifestyle, shopping, lunching with Jason's social circle, planning renovations to make the already extravagant house even more to her taste. Jason was civil but distant, treating me more like a houseguest than a stepdaughter. When he spoke to me, it was with the condescending tone of someone addressing a particularly slow child. "Your mother tells me you're doing well in school," he'd say over dinner. "Good for you. Education is important for people who need to earn a living." Then he'd wink at Mom, as if they shared some private joke about people who worked for a living. The distance between my mother and me grew with each passing day. She missed my parent-teacher conferences because they conflicted with her tennis lessons. She forgot about my orchestra recital because she was getting a facial. When I achieved honor roll, she barely glanced at the certificate before asking if I'd seen her new diamond bracelet. The only stability in my life was my weekends with Dad. He'd pick me up Friday after school, and we'd spend the weekend in his small apartment, cooking together, watching movies, or just talking. He asked about my schoolwork, my friends, my feelings about the dramatic changes in our lives. Despite his own pain, he never spoke ill of Mom or Jason, though I could see the hurt in his eyes when I described their extravagant lifestyle. "Your mother is finding her way," he'd say carefully. "People sometimes get caught up in things that don't ultimately matter. What's important is that you know your worth isn't determined by fancy houses or expensive things." As my 15th birthday approached, Mom and Jason started planning their next big adventure. A 2-week vacation to the Maldives, staying in one of those overwater bungalows Mom had always dreamed about. The trip would happen during my spring break. "You're going to love it," Mom said, showing me pictures on her iPad. "The water is so clear you can see straight to the bottom. And there's a glass floor in the bedroom so you can watch fish swim underneath while you fall asleep." I was surprised but pleased that they planned to include me. Maybe this trip would give Mom and me a chance to reconnect. Maybe away from all the distractions of her new life, she'd remember how to be my mother again. How wrong I was. April 12th. I'll never forget that date. It was a crisp spring morning when our driver loaded our luggage into Jason's Range Rover for the trip to JFK Airport. I'd packed carefully, following Mom's instructions about appropriate attire for a luxury resort. I'd even used my savings to buy a new bathing suit, wanting to fit in with my glamorous mother and stepfather. The drive to the airport was filled with Jason and Mom discussing their plans: scuba diving, couples massages, private dinners on the beach. I sat quietly in the back seat, imagining myself snorkeling in those crystal waters, taking photos to show Dad and my friends when we returned. We checked in our luggage at the international terminal, and I handed my passport to the airline representative along with Mom and Jason's. The woman processed their documents first, then frowned slightly when she looked at mine. "I don't see a reservation for Brooke Wilson," she said, typing something into her computer. "Check again," Mom said sharply. "She's traveling with us." The woman checked again and shook her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I only have reservations for Amber and Jason Thompson." I looked at Mom, confused. Did they make a mistake? That's when I saw it. The quick exchange of glances between Mom and Jason, the slight curl of his lip, the way Mom's shoulders tensed before she turned to me with a practiced smile. "Honey, there's been a change of plans," she said, her voice artificially bright. "Jason and I decided this will be an adults-only trip. A second honeymoon, really." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Your father is coming to pick you up," she continued, avoiding my eyes. "We thought it would be best if you stayed with him during break instead." "But my suitcase," I stammered, watching as the attendant tagged and sent Mom and Jason's luggage down the conveyor belt. "Oh, we can just bring that back with us," Mom said dismissively. "You have plenty of clothes at your father's." "When is Dad coming?" I asked, my voice small as the reality of what was happening began to sink in. Mom glanced at her diamond-encrusted watch, a recent gift from Jason. "He should be here any minute." We told him noon. I checked my own watch. It was 11:45 a.m. "So I'll just wait here?" I asked, fighting back tears as travelers streamed around us, families headed on vacations together. "That's right, sweetheart," Mom said, already turning away. "Jason, we should head to security if we want to have time to visit the first-class lounge." Mom, I called, my voice cracking. You didn't even tell me I wasn't going. I packed everything. I was ready. She turned back briefly, and I saw a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, cross her face before it hardened again. Don't be dramatic, Brooke. It's just a vacation. You'll be fine with your father. Jason checked his Rolex impatiently. Amber, we need to go. Mom, please, I tried one more time, tears now flowing freely. At least wait with me until Dad gets here. He'll be here any minute, she repeated, more firmly this time. Jason and I need alone time. It's important for our marriage. And with that, she turned and walked away, Jason's hand possessively on the small of her back. The last thing I heard was his voice, finally, 2 weeks without the teenager. I thought she'd never stop whining. I stood there, utterly abandoned, watching my mother choose a luxury vacation with her new husband over her own daughter. For the next hour, I sat on a bench near the check-in counter, calling my father repeatedly. Each time, the call went straight to voicemail. A cold feeling of dread began to spread through me. What if he wasn't coming? What if there had been some miscommunication? Or worse, what if this had been the plan all along? By 1:30 p.m., a kind-faced airline employee approached me, having noticed me sitting alone for so long. Are you okay, sweetie? She asked. Her name tag read Patricia. I tried to explain through my tears what had happened. Patricia's expression grew increasingly concerned as I spoke. Let me see if I can help, she said, leading me to the airline's customer service desk. She tried calling both my parents' numbers. My father's still went to voicemail. My mother's rang several times before going to voicemail as well. They're probably on the plane already, I said miserably. Patricia spoke quietly with her supervisor, then returned to me. Is there anyone else we can call for you? Another relative, perhaps. I thought of my Aunt Hannah, my father's sister. She lived about an hour from the airport. I had her number in my phone. Patricia dialed it for me and explained the situation when my aunt answered. Aunt Hannah was furious. I could hear her raised voice through the phone, though Patricia had stepped a few feet away to speak with her. When Patricia returned, she assured me my aunt was on her way, but would take some time to arrive due to the distance. Would you like something to eat while you wait? Patricia asked kindly. The airline will provide a meal voucher given the circumstances. I wasn't hungry, but I nodded anyway, grateful for her kindness. She brought me a sandwich and a soda from one of the airport restaurants, sitting with me during her break as I picked at the food. My mom just left me, I said, still unable to fully process what had happened. Who does that to their child? Patricia's face was a careful mask of professionalism, but I could see the anger in her eyes. Some people make choices that are hard to understand, she said diplomatically. The important thing is that your aunt is coming, and you won't be alone. 3 agonizing hours later, Aunt Hannah burst into the terminal, her face flushed with a combination of worry and rage. She pulled me into a fierce hug, then held me at arm's length, examining me as if checking for injuries. Are you okay? I can't believe Amber would do this. And your father, she stopped herself, taking a deep breath. Let's get you home. We'll sort everything out. As we drove away from the airport, I stared out the window, numb with shock and betrayal. Aunt Hannah explained that my father had been rushed to the hospital that morning with appendicitis. He was in surgery when Mom and Jason should have been communicating with him about the change of plans. He had no idea, Aunt Hannah said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. He's still in the hospital recovering. When I told the nurses what happened, they had to give him something to calm him down because he was trying to get out of bed to come get you. So that was it. My mother had abandoned me at an airport, knowing my father was physically unable to come get me. She had left me, her 15-year-old daughter, alone and afraid, just so she could enjoy a luxury vacation with her new husband. As we pulled into Aunt Hannah's driveway, I checked my phone one last time. There was a single text from my mother. Hope you found your dad. Having drinks on the beach. Signal spotty here. Talk in 2 weeks. Not even a question about whether I was safe. Not a hint of concern or remorse. That was the moment I realized the mother I thought I knew was gone, if she had ever existed at all. After my father was released from the hospital 3 days later, we had a serious conversation about my living arrangements. Up until then, the custody arrangement had given my mother primary custody, with Dad having weekend visitation. But after the airport incident, Dad was determined to change that. "I want you to live with me full-time, Brooke," he said as we sat in Aunt Hannah's living room. He was still pale from his surgery, moving gingerly as he shifted in his seat. "What your mother did was unacceptable. It was abandonment, plain and simple. Will the court allow it?" Aunt Hannah asked, bringing in a tray of tea. "Amber has primary custody." "I've already spoken with my lawyer," Dad replied. "Given the circumstances, we have a strong case for a modification. Especially since Brooke is 15 and the court will take her preference into account." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. The thought of returning to my mother's, to Jason's mansion, filled me with anxiety. "I want to live with you, Dad." During the 2 weeks my mother was in the Maldives, my father's lawyer filed the necessary paperwork. Mom's communication during her vacation was minimal, a few sporadic text messages with photos of tropical drinks and sunsets, but never any questions about how I was doing or whether I was okay after being abandoned at the airport. When she finally returned, tanned and laden with shopping bags, she was served with papers requesting an emergency custody modification. Her reaction was a mixture of surprise and indignation. "You're making too big a deal of this," she said when she finally called. "It was just a mix-up with the timing. I told Michael noon and he wasn't there." "He was having emergency surgery, Mom," I replied, my voice tight with anger. "And you didn't even check to make sure I was okay before getting on your plane." "Well, I knew someone would help you," she said dismissively. "You're old enough to handle a little change of plans." That phrase, "old enough to handle it," was one Jason had used repeatedly in the background. I could hear his voice coaching her through the conversation. "I'm still 15, Mom," I said quietly. "And you left me alone at an airport without making sure I had a safe place to go." "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I'm not going to argue about this. You'll be back home by the weekend." But I wasn't. The family court judge granted my father temporary full custody pending a formal hearing, citing the airport abandonment as evidence of concerning judgment by my mother. Moving in with Dad full-time required some adjustments. His one-bedroom apartment wasn't designed for a teenage girl to live there permanently. He immediately gave me his bedroom and took the sofa bed in the living room, despite my protests. "It's temporary," he assured me. "I'm looking for a 2-bedroom place. We'll make this work, Brooke. I promise." True to his word, within a month, Dad had found us the modest 2-bedroom apartment closer to my school. It wasn't fancy, no swimming pool, no home theater, none of the luxuries I'd briefly experienced at Jason's mansion, but it felt like a home in a way that mansion never had. Dad hung my art projects on the refrigerator. He attended every school event. He learned to French braid my hair by watching YouTube tutorials. And when nightmares about being abandoned woke me in the early hours, he was always there with hot chocolate and patience, listening as I processed my fears. My mother's interest in maintaining our relationship waned with remarkable speed once I was no longer living under her roof. The formal custody hearing was a formality. She didn't even contest Dad's request for full custody, sending her lawyer with a statement that she recognized her daughter needed time with her father and requested only occasional weekend visitation, when her schedule permitted. Those weekends rarely materialized. She'd call last minute to cancel, citing charity galas, spa weekends, or impromptu trips with Jason. Each cancellation hurt less than the one before, as I gradually accepted the reality of who my mother truly was. Meanwhile, I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Brenner, who specialized in adolescent psychology. The betrayal and abandonment had left deep wounds, manifesting in anxiety, trust issues, and a fear of being left behind that affected my friendships and school performance. "What you're experiencing is a normal response to an abnormal situation," Dr. Brenner explained during one session. "Your mother's actions violated one of the most fundamental bonds, the parent-child relationship. It's okay to feel angry, hurt, and confused." Through therapy, I began to understand that my mother's behavior reflected her own issues and limitations, not my worthiness of love. It was a difficult concept to internalize, especially for a 15-year-old girl who just wanted her mom to care. At school, my counselor Stephanie became another important adult in my corner. When I struggled with concentration or had anxiety attacks before class presentations, she provided a safe space in her office where I could regroup. She also helped mediate when I received a barrage of texts from my mother ahead of the winter formal, suddenly interested in my life again and insisting on buying me an expensive dress. "You get to set boundaries," Stephanie reminded me. "You can appreciate the offer while still protecting yourself from further hurt." I declined the dress, instead wearing one Aunt Hannah helped me find at a consignment shop. It wasn't designer, but I felt comfortable and authentically myself in it. As Christmas approached, the first since the airport incident, I felt a growing dread about how the holidays would unfold. In previous years, even after the divorce, I'd split the day between my parents. This year, my mother had already begun texting about the fabulous gifts she had for me at her house and how Jason's family would all be there to celebrate. The thought of spending Christmas in that mansion, pretending everything was fine while opening extravagant presents meant to buy my affection, made me physically ill. After a tear-filled therapy session, Dr. Brenner helped me draft a text declining the invitation. Mom's response was predictably dramatic, accusations of being influenced against her, reminders of all she'd sacrificed for me, though I couldn't identify any actual sacrifices, and finally, a guilt-laden, "Fine, do what you want. The gifts will be here when you're ready to stop punishing me." Instead, Dad and I created our own Christmas traditions. We volunteered at a local shelter on Christmas Eve, serving meals to families in need. On Christmas morning, we exchanged modest but thoughtful gifts, then joined Aunt Hannah and her family for dinner. There was no crystal, no staff serving the meal, no Instagram-perfect table cape, just family, laughter, and genuine warmth. As I helped clear the dishes afterward, I glanced at my phone to find my mother had posted several photos of herself, Jason, and his adult children opening gifts beside a massive tree in their formal living room. She'd tagged me in one photo showing an array of wrapped packages with my name, captioned, "Missing my baby girl today, #blessed, #family first." The performative nature of it, using my absence to garner sympathy on social media while making virtually no real effort to repair our relationship, crystallized something for me. My mother wasn't just materialistic, she viewed relationships themselves as transactional and performative. Including me. I showed the post to Dad, who sighed and put his arm around me. "You know what makes a family, Brooke? It's not gifts or posts or fancy trips. It's showing up. It's being there when someone needs you. That's something no amount of money can buy." As I looked around at the mismatched chairs, the slightly lopsided homemade pie, and the faces of people who had proven they would never abandon me, I knew with complete certainty that he was right. After the custody change and the airport incident, I channeled my emotional turmoil into academics. School became my sanctuary, a place where hard work yielded predictable results, where I could control outcomes through my own efforts, unlike the chaotic personal life I'd been thrust into. My sophomore year, I joined the debate team, discovering a voice I hadn't known I possessed. There was something empowering about constructing logical arguments, about learning to advocate effectively. Perhaps it was a response to feeling so voiceless during my parents' divorce and subsequent events with my mother. "You're a natural," my debate coach, Mr. Holloway, told me after I won a regional competition. "You've got this remarkable ability to stay calm under pressure." I didn't tell him that after experiencing public abandonment at an airport, few performance pressures could compare. It was through debate that I met Megan Reynolds and Tyler Nguyen, who would become my closest friends. Megan's parents were divorced too, though her situation was amicable compared to mine. Tyler lived with his grandmother after losing both parents in a car accident when he was 12. Both understood loss and adaptation in ways my other classmates couldn't. We formed a tight-knit trio, spending weekends studying together, watching movies at my dad's apartment, or hiking in the state park when we needed to clear our heads. They never pushed when I didn't want to talk about my mother, but they listened without judgment when I did. They became the family I chose, filling gaps left by the family that had fractured. Shortly after turning 16, I got a job at a local bookstore. The owner, Mrs. Finch, was a retired English teacher who created a warm, intellectually stimulating environment. Between shelving books and helping customers, I discovered authors whose words helped me make sense of my experiences. Toni Morrison on family complexities, Cheryl Strayed on resilience, Joan Didion on grief and reinvention. My first paycheck was modest, but it represented something profound: independence. I opened a savings account, determined to build a financial cushion that would prevent me from ever being dependent on someone like my mother. This newfound resolve was further strengthened when Dad experienced health problems midway through my junior year. Years of stress had contributed to high blood pressure, and he was hospitalized briefly after a particularly concerning episode. Sitting beside his hospital bed, watching monitors track his vital signs, I was struck by the fragility of my support system. "You need to take better care of yourself," I told him, trying to mask my fear with firmness. He squeezed my hand. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just need to watch the salt and get more exercise." But the incident shook me. What if something happened to Dad? I had no safety net, certainly not my mother, who by that point was making only sporadic, superficial contact, usually timed with holidays or my birthday when she could post about it on social media. I redoubled my efforts at school and work, determined to create security for myself. I researched scholarships obsessively, stayed after school to use the counseling office's college guidebooks, and maintained a perfect GPA despite working 20 hours a week. Sleep became optional. Self-sufficiency became essential. Senior year brought unexpected news. Dad had been dating someone. Laura, a kindergarten teacher he'd met at a community education class. He'd kept it quiet, worried about how I'd react to another change. "I didn't want you to think I was trying to replace your mom," he explained nervously when he finally told me. "Dad," I said, hugging him tightly, "no one could ever replace Mom. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be happy." I meant it sincerely. After everything he'd sacrificed to provide stability for me, he deserved happiness. And Laura proved to be nothing like my mother. She was kind, unpretentious, and genuinely interested in my life without trying to act like a replacement parent. As graduation approached, my hard work paid off with an acceptance letter and substantial scholarship to State University. The financial aid package, combined with my savings and a work-study position, meant I could attend without burdening Dad. The morning of graduation, I stood in my bedroom, adjusting my cap and gown, when Dad knocked softly on the door. "Someone's here to see you," he said, his expression carefully neutral. I followed him to the living room to find my mother perched awkwardly on our couch, looking out of place in her designer dress and expensive jewelry. She stood when she saw me, arms outstretched for a hug I couldn't quite bring myself to give. "My baby's graduating," she exclaimed, as if we'd maintained a normal relationship all these years. "I'm so proud of you." I accepted her air kiss, noticing how she smelled of unfamiliar perfume, something expensive and French. She handed me a small wrapped box. "A little graduation present," she said. "Open it now." Inside was a pair of diamond earrings that probably cost more than a semester of my college tuition. "They're beautiful," I said politely, placing them back in the box. "Thank you for coming." "Of course I came," she said, as if the idea of missing it was absurd, despite having missed nearly every other significant event of my high school years. "And I want you to know, Jason and I would be happy to contribute to your college expenses. We could even help you get a nicer apartment than those awful dorms." The offer came with invisible strings I could almost see, glinting like fishing line in sunlight. Accepting would give her the right to claim involvement in my achievements, to position herself as the supportive mother she hadn't been. "That's very generous," I said carefully, "but I have a scholarship and savings. I'll be fine." Her smile faltered slightly. "Well, the offer stands. No daughter of mine should have to work while studying. It's unnecessary when we have the means to help." We, meaning her and Jason, whose wealth had become so entwined with her identity that she no longer seemed to recognize where he ended and she began. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos, Mom insisted on several pictures of just the two of us, which she immediately posted with captions about her brilliant daughter and how a mother's love knows no bounds. The performative nature of it made my skin crawl. When she finally left to attend a charity luncheon, making elaborate promises about visiting me at college that we both knew she wouldn't keep, I confronted her quietly. "Why did you really come today, Mom?" She blinked, genuinely confused by the question. "You're my daughter. It's your graduation. But you've missed everything else," I said. "My debate championships. My scholarship ceremony. The college acceptance celebration Dad organized. Why show up now?" Her expression hardened slightly. "I don't think that's fair, Brooke. I've been giving you space since you've made it clear you prefer living with your father. I can't win with you. I stay away, you're angry. I show up, you're still angry." "I'm not angry," I said, surprising myself with the realization that it was true. "I'm just clear-eyed now. You come to events you can post about. You offer financial help that would let you claim credit for my achievements. But you've never once asked how I felt about being abandoned at that airport. You've never acknowledged what that did to me." She glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with having this conversation in public. "That was a misunderstanding that you and your father blew out of proportion. And frankly, I'm tired of being villainized for it. I've apologized." But she hadn't. Not really. Not in any way that took responsibility or showed genuine remorse. "I hope you enjoyed the ceremony," I said finally, stepping back. "Thank you for the earrings." As I walked away to find Dad and Laura, I felt a weight lifting, the burden of seeking validation from someone incapable of providing it. I was headed to college, building a life on my own terms, free from the emotional chaos of my mother's conditional affection. That summer passed quickly with preparations for university. I sold the diamond earrings, with Dad's reluctant blessing, and added the money to my emergency fund. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, converting my mother's attempt at buying affection into practical security for my future. When move-in day arrived, Dad and Laura helped transport my modest belongings to campus. My roommate Jasmine arrived with her parents, the 5 of us working together to arrange furniture and hang posters. As we shared pizza afterward, sitting cross-legged on dorm room floors, I realized I'd created something precious, a chosen family bound by genuine care rather than obligation or appearance. Mom sent a lavish care package 2 weeks later, gourmet snacks, expensive skincare products, and a note saying she'd love to visit when things calmed down. The package arrived the same day I learned I'd been accepted for a research assistant position with a psychology professor studying family dynamics and resilience in adolescence. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother's abandonment had inadvertently set me on a path toward understanding the very dynamics that had shaped my life. As I stored away the fancy lotions she'd sent, I wondered if she'd ever realize that the most valuable thing she could have given me was simply her presence, not her presence. 8 years flew by like pages torn from a calendar in an old movie. I graduated from State University with honors, then completed a master's degree in clinical psychology, specializing in adolescent trauma. My thesis on abandonment and its long-term psychological impacts won a departmental award, an achievement I celebrated with Dad, Laura, and my close friends, but didn't share with my mother. Our contact had dwindled to occasional text exchanges and obligatory holiday phone calls. She still sent expensive birthday and Christmas gifts, which I donated to charity auctions that benefited youth mental health programs. It seemed fitting that her attempts to buy my affection would instead fund therapy for kids experiencing similar trauma to mine. After graduate school, I secured a position at a community mental health center, working primarily with teenagers in the foster care system or those from disrupted homes. The work was challenging but deeply fulfilling. Each time I helped a young person process feelings of abandonment or unworthiness, I healed a small piece of my own past. "You have this way of connecting," my supervisor noted during a performance review. "The kids trust you immediately." "That's rare." "I've been where they are," I explained simply. "Not exactly the same circumstances, but I understand how it feels when the people who should protect you don't." By 28, I had saved enough to open my own small private practice focusing specifically on children and teens dealing with parental abandonment. I rented a cozy office space, furnished it with comfortable chairs and calming colors, and created the kind of environment I wish I'd had access to at 15. Dad beamed with pride at my practice's opening celebration. "Look at you," he said, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Taking something painful and turning it into purpose." I couldn't be prouder. It was during this professional high point that personal tragedy struck. Dad's blood pressure issues, managed but never fully resolved, led to a severe stroke during my final year of graduate school. Though he survived, his recovery was complicated by secondary infections. He passed away 3 months later, with Laura and me at his bedside. The loss was devastating. Dad had been my rock, my constant, my proof that unconditional love existed. At his funeral, colleagues from his accounting firm spoke about his integrity and kindness. Laura shared stories of his quiet generosity. My friends recounted how he'd made each of them feel welcome in our home. Not once during these tributes did anyone mention material wealth or status, the things my mother had valued above all else. My mother attended the funeral, appropriately somber in designer black. She offered a stiff hug and generic condolences, clearly uncomfortable with raw emotion. She left immediately after the service, citing a charity board meeting she couldn't miss. In Dad's will, he left me his modest savings and the small house he'd purchased after I went to college. The house wasn't grand, a simple 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, but it represented financial security and a physical connection to him. Moving into that house after his death was both painful and healing. I converted one bedroom into a home office and another into a guest room, keeping Dad's beloved recliner in the living room and his collection of jazz records in the cabinet he'd built. Among his personal effects, I found a journal he'd kept since the divorce. In it, he documented his fears for me after witnessing my mother's behavior, his determination to provide stability despite limited resources, and his immense pride in the woman I was becoming. The final entry, written just days before his stroke, read, "Brooke has transformed her pain into purpose. I wish Amber could see the remarkable daughter she's missing out on knowing, truly knowing, beyond superficial appearances. But even if she never does, Brooke knows her worth isn't measured by designer labels or social status. And that's the greatest success I could have hoped for as her father." Those words became my touchstone during the grief that followed. And they were in my mind when, 6 months after Dad's death, I met Daniel. He came to a community workshop I was leading on supporting children through family transitions. As a school counselor, he worked with many of the same issues I addressed in my practice. Our professional connection quickly deepened into friendship and then, cautiously on my part, into romance. My experience with my mother had left me wary of relationships. I watched for signs of materialism, for conditional affection, for performance over substance. Daniel showed none of these. His idea of a perfect date was hiking followed by cooking dinner together. He drove a 10-year-old car he'd paid off years ago and lived in a modest apartment filled with books. What he lacked in flash, he made up for in consistency, showing up exactly when he said he would, remembering details about my day, proving through small daily actions that I was valued. I have trust issues, I warned him early in our relationship. Abandonment issues. The whole psychological package. He didn't flinch. I know. And I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to. After 2 years of dating, Daniel proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains. The ring he offered wasn't flashy, a simple solitaire that had belonged to his grandmother, but the commitment behind it was solid. As we planned our wedding, I debated whether to invite my mother. "She's still your mom," Daniel said gently. "But it's completely your decision. Either way, I support you." After much consideration, I sent her an invitation. Her response was a check for $20,000 and a list of suggested venues far grander than the intimate garden ceremony we'd planned. I returned the check with a note explaining we'd already finalized our plans but would welcome her presence. She attended, bringing Jason and an ostentatious gift, but left immediately after the ceremony, missing the reception entirely. The photo she posted later, just one carefully staged shot of us together, made it appear she'd been centrally involved in a day she'd barely participated in. By my 30th birthday, my private practice had grown to include 2 additional therapists. We specialized in helping children process complex family dynamics, particularly abandonment and divorce. I'd also begun working on a book combining psychological research with personal experience, hoping to reach people who couldn't access therapy. The local newspaper ran a feature story about my clinic, highlighting our work with the foster care system. The reporter asked what motivated my focus on abandonment issues. Personal experience, I answered honestly. At 15, I was abandoned at an airport by my mother, who chose a luxury vacation with her new husband over ensuring my safety. That experience shaped me profoundly, first as a wound, then as a catalyst for understanding how children process such betrayals. I believe our deepest hurts can become our greatest sources of empathy if we're willing to examine them honestly. The article included that quote, along with a photo of me in my office surrounded by the art therapy projects of young clients. It appeared in the Sunday edition and was subsequently picked up by several online publications focusing on mental health. 3 days later, I received an email from an address I didn't immediately recognize. The subject line read simply, "I saw the article." When I opened it, I was stunned by its contents. "Brooke," it began. "I just read about your work in the paper. I know it's been a long time since we've really talked. I'm wondering if we could meet for coffee? There are things I need to say to you in person. Please." Mom. The tone was different from her usual communications, no false cheer, no extravagant offers, no social media-ready phrases. Just a simple, direct request. I showed the email to Daniel that evening. "What do you think she wants?" he asked. "I have no idea," I replied honestly. "We haven't had a real conversation in years. Just performative holiday calls and the occasional text. Are you open to hearing what she has to say?" I considered the question carefully. "I think so. I've done enough therapeutic work to have boundaries. And I'm curious." After consulting with my own therapist about setting appropriate expectations, I replied to my mother's email, suggesting a coffee shop near my office, neutral territory. She responded within minutes, agreeing to meet the following afternoon. As I closed my laptop, I felt a strange mixture of apprehension and something like hope, not for reconciliation necessarily, but for closure, for answers to questions that had lingered for years. Why had she really abandoned me that day? Did she ever regret the choices she'd made? Had she ever truly seen me as more than an accessory to her curated life? I didn't expect satisfying answers. But for the first time in years, I was ready to ask the questions. The coffee shop I'd chosen was busy but not crowded, a place where we could talk without being overheard, but public enough that I could leave easily if needed. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table near the back with a clear view of the entrance. At precisely 2 p.m., the door opened, and for a moment I didn't recognize the woman who entered. She scanned the room anxiously, and only then did I realize it was my mother. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfectly highlighted hair, the statement jewelry. The woman walking hesitantly toward me wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail showing significant gray at the temples. She looked older, certainly, but it was more than that. She looked diminished somehow, as if someone had turned down her internal volume. "Brooke," she said, her voice catching slightly. "Thank you for meeting me." I gestured to the chair across from mine, studying her as she sat down. Up close, the changes were even more apparent. Fine lines around her eyes, no evidence of the Botox she'd once religiously maintained. Her nails were short and unpolished, her only jewelry a simple watch and wedding band. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked, falling back on social niceties to navigate the awkwardness. "Just tea, please. Herbal if they have it." I signaled a barista, ordered her tea and another coffee for myself, then turned back to face her. "You wanted to talk?" She nodded, fidgeting with a paper napkin. "I saw the article about your clinic. About what you said regarding what happened at the airport." She swallowed hard. "You've done remarkable work, Brooke. I'm proud of you." "Thank you," I said neutrally, waiting for whatever came next. "The thing is," she continued, her voice dropping, "I need to tell you something. Things have changed. My life is different now." "Different how?" The barista arrived with our drinks, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. When she left, My mother wrapped her hands around the mug as if seeking warmth. Jason left me, she said bluntly. 3 years ago. For his personal trainer. She's 28. I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me, a small, hurt part one wasn't proud of, felt a flicker of vindication. But the therapist in me recognized genuine pain in her expression. I'm sorry, I said finally, and meant it. The divorce was not in my favor, she continued. There was a prenup, of course. I got the condo in Palm Beach and a settlement, but nothing like what I'd become accustomed to. She took a shaky breath. I thought it would be fine. The money would last if I was careful. But then I got sick. Sick? I echoed, noticing for the first time the unnatural thinness of her wrists, the pallor beneath her makeup. Breast cancer. Stage 2. Treatable, but expensive. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs. She shook her head. I had to sell the condo. Then the car. Now I'm renting a 1-bedroom apartment and trying to find work, but it turns out there isn't much demand for 54-year-old former trophy wives with no recent work experience. She looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. The irony isn't lost on me, Brooke. I chose material things over you. I chose a man who valued appearance over substance. And now I have neither. I sat back, processing this flood of information. Why are you telling me this? Because I owe you an apology, she said, voice cracking. A real one, not the dismissive excuses I've made in the past. What I did to you at that airport was unforgivable. And it wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. It was selfish and cruel. She wiped at her eyes. I've had a lot of time to think during chemo sessions. About the choices I've made. The person I became. I don't like her very much. The raw honesty was so unlike the mother I'd known that I didn't immediately know how to respond. Part of me was wary. Was this genuine remorse or another manipulation? I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued when I remained silent. I don't deserve it. And I'm not asking for money, though God knows I need it. I needed you to know that I understand now. What I threw away. What I lost. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope, placing it on the table between us. These are some photos. Of you. School pictures, mostly, that your father sent before he passed. I carry them everywhere. It's the closest thing I have to watching you grow up. I picked up the envelope, peeking inside to find school portraits from years past, each one carefully preserved. It was such a simple, maternal thing, something mothers everywhere did without thought. But mine had needed to receive these secondhand, having chosen a different path. There's something else, she said, her voice barely audible now. My landlord is selling the building. I have to be out in 30 days, and I haven't found another place I can afford. And with my medical bills. She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. I was wondering if you know of any resources. Agencies that might help with housing for cancer patients. Or job placement for women my age. I've tried the usual channels, but thought with your work you might know of something not widely advertised. The request was so modest, so far from what I'd expected, that it momentarily stunned me. My mother, who had once dismissed my father's apartment as barely suitable for human habitation, was now asking for help finding something similar for herself. You're not asking to stay with me. The question slipped out before I could stop it. She looked genuinely shocked. God, no. Brooke, I abandoned you. I've been a terrible mother. I would never presume to impose on you like that. In that moment, seeing her genuine surprise at my question, I began to believe that perhaps her remorse was real. I'll make some calls, I said finally. I know several social workers who specialize in helping cancer patients navigate resources. Thank you, she said, relief evident in her face. That's more than I deserve. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared past and this unexpected present filling the space between us. How are you feeling now? I asked. Health-wise. The prognosis is good. I finished radiation last month. Now it's just follow-up appointments and medications. She smiled faintly. And trying to rebuild some kind of life from the ashes of the one I burned down. As our conversation continued, I found myself studying this new version of my mother, humbled by circumstance, stripped of the materialistic armor she'd worn for so long. There was something authentic about her now that had been missing during my entire adolescence. When we finally parted ways, she hugged me briefly, awkwardly, as if unsure she had the right. "Thank you for meeting me, Brooke. It means more than you know." I watched her walk away, noticing the slight limp, a side effect of the chemotherapy, perhaps. Then I called Daniel. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. "It was not what I expected," I replied, still processing. "She's changed. Or maybe life changed her." That evening, Daniel and I had a long conversation about boundaries, compassion, and what obligations, if any, I had toward the mother who had abandoned me. "This isn't about what she deserves," Daniel said thoughtfully. "It's about who you want to be in this situation. You've built your life around helping people heal from exactly this kind of trauma. The question is whether that extends to the person who caused yours." His words resonated deeply. I'd spent years helping others navigate the complex emotions surrounding abandonment and reconciliation. Now I face those same questions in my own life. After several days of reflection and consultation with my therapist, I made a decision. I wouldn't invite my mother to live with us. That would be too much, too soon, potentially destructive to the life and boundaries I'd built. But I could help her find appropriate housing near me, where I could offer limited support while maintaining necessary distance. When I called to tell her, her gratitude was overwhelming. "I don't deserve this kindness," she said, voice thick with emotion. "Maybe not," I replied honestly. "But I'm not doing it because you deserve it. I'm doing it because it's who I choose to be." Over the next 6 months, a careful, tentative relationship began to form between my mother and me. I helped her secure a small apartment in a subsidized senior building about 20 minutes from my home. The space was modest but clean, with a community garden she could access and weekly social activities organized by the management. From the beginning, I established clear boundaries. We would meet once a week for coffee or a meal. I would help coordinate her medical appointments when needed, but she would take primary responsibility for her care. I would not provide financial support beyond the initial security deposit I'd covered. She needed to apply for appropriate assistance programs and find sustainable solutions. "I understand," she said when I outlined these terms. "You're already doing more than I have any right to expect." Watching her navigate this new reality was revealing. The woman who had once refused to shop anywhere but Neiman Marcus now scoured thrift stores for furniture. She who had employed a personal chef now learned to cook simple meals on a tight budget. And most surprisingly, she seemed almost relieved by the simplification of her life. All those years chasing status and luxury, she reflected during one of our coffee meetings. And none of it brought me joy. Not real joy. After she settled into her new place, I suggested she might consider volunteering at my clinic. We needed help with administrative tasks, filing, answering phones, organizing the children's play area. It would provide structure to her days and allow her to contribute in a meaningful way. "You'd trust me with that?" she asked, clearly surprised. "After everything?" "It's a trial basis," I clarified. "And strictly professional. But yes, I think it could work." And remarkably, it did. My mother brought an unexpected diligence to her volunteer role. She arrived early, stayed late, and treated the children and families with a gentle respect that I'd never seen from her before. When a young girl arrived in tears after being unexpectedly dropped off by her father, who had important business, my mother sat with her, offering quiet comfort until her session began. "I recognized that look in her eyes," my mother told me later. "I've caused it before." 6 months into this arrangement, one of our administrative assistants left for maternity leave. I offered my mother the temporary paid position. "Are you sure that's appropriate?" she asked. "I don't want to complicate things between us. I'm your daughter outside this building," I explained. "But here, I'm the director of the clinic, making a practical staffing decision. You've proven yourself reliable in the volunteer role. This is the logical next step." Her work ethic in the paid position continued to impress me. She developed systems for streamlining our paperwork, reorganized the filing system, and showed particular skill in making nervous children feel welcome when they arrived. Parents began specifically mentioning Ms. Amber in their feedback, noting her warmth and efficiency. As her health stabilized and our professional relationship solidified, our personal relationship began a cautious thaw. Our weekly coffees expanded to occasional dinners, sometimes including Daniel. She asked thoughtful questions about our lives, listened attentively to the answers, and never once pressured for more involvement than I was ready to give. "She's really changed," Daniel observed after one such dinner. "It's like meeting an entirely different person than the one you described from your childhood." "Loss has a way of stripping people down to essentials," I replied. "She lost everything she once valued: wealth, status, youth, health. It's forced her to reconsider what actually matters." The true test of this transformation came when Daniel and I discovered we were expecting our first child. We shared the news with close friends and family, including my mother, during a small gathering at our home. "I'm going to be a grandmother," she said, tears filling her eyes. I didn't think I'd be included in something so important. After the other guests had left, she pulled me aside, her expression serious. "Brooke, I need you to know something. I understand that I have no automatic right to be part of this child's life. That will be entirely your decision, and I'll respect whatever boundaries you set." The humility of this statement, the recognition of consequences rather than entitlement, confirmed how profoundly she had changed. "I'd like my child to know their grandmother," I said carefully. "But it will be on terms that ensure they never experience what I did. No abandoned promises. No conditional love. No disappearing acts." "I promise you," she said, holding my gaze steadily, "I will never do to your child what I did to you. I'll be there consistently or not at all. Your choice." 8 months later, our daughter Grace entered the world. My mother was not in the delivery room. That space was reserved for Daniel and our closest friend Jasmine. But she was in the waiting room, and when we were ready for visitors, she approached the bassinet with a reverence I'd never seen from her. "She's perfect," she whispered, carefully tracing Grace's tiny fingers with her own. "Absolutely perfect." In the years that followed, my mother proved true to her word. She showed up for weekly visits, never canceling at the last minute. She remembered birthdays without prompting, often making handmade gifts rather than purchasing expensive ones. When she offered to babysit occasionally, she followed our parenting guidelines precisely, never undermining our authority or dismissing our concerns as she once had with my father. One afternoon, when Grace was 3, I arrived to pick her up from my mother's apartment and found them sitting together on the floor, looking through an old photo album. "Mommy was a little girl too," Grace was saying, pointing to a childhood photo of me. "Yes, she was," my mother replied. "And I made some big mistakes when she was growing up. That's why I try extra hard to be a good grandma now. Because everyone deserves second chances when they learn from their mistakes." The simple wisdom of that statement, delivered to a 3-year-old, but meant for my ears, encapsulated the journey we'd traveled. That evening, after Grace was asleep, Daniel found me on the porch swing, lost in thought. "Heavy thoughts?" he asked, joining me. "Just reflecting," I replied. "On forgiveness. On change. On the fact that sometimes life comes full circle in ways you never expect." "Are you at peace with your relationship with your mom now?" he asked. I considered the question carefully. Peace is a good word for it. Not forgetting. Not erasing the past. But finding a way forward that honors who we are now, not just who we were then. Through my work with abandoned children, I've learned that healing rarely follows a straight line. It spirals, circles back, takes unexpected detours. The same proved true in my own life. The mother who abandoned me at 15 became the grandmother who showed up consistently for my child. The woman who chose luxury over responsibility learned, painfully, irreversibly, that relationships are the only true wealth we possess. I still help clients navigate their own complex family dynamics, drawing now not just from my experience of abandonment, but also from my journey toward conditional reconciliation. I teach them that boundaries aren't walls, but flexible membranes, allowing what's healthy to pass through while keeping harmful elements at bay. I show them that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or even full trust. It simply means releasing the expectation that the past could have been different. Most importantly, I help them understand that while we cannot control others' choices, We always retain the power to determine our own response, to choose who we become in the face of pain. The airport where I stood abandoned at 15 could have been my defining moment, the wound that shaped all my future relationships. Instead, it became one chapter in a longer, more complex story of resilience, boundaries, and ultimately, compassion. Life rarely offers perfect resolutions or complete closure. My relationship with my mother remains a work in progress, defined by careful boundaries and tempered expectations. But there is healing in this imperfection, in the acknowledgement that human connections are both fragile and surprisingly resilient. As I close this chapter of my story, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences with betrayal and forgiveness. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with someone who hurt you? Have you witnessed genuine change in a person who once caused pain? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, your past shapes you, but it doesn't have to define you. The power to write the next chapter always remains in your hands. Thank you for witnessing this journey with me. May you find the strength to set necessary boundaries and the wisdom to recognize genuine transformation when it appears in your own life.